till lunch, I was having the scary thought of actually starting and ending a, not starting, but at least ending a Pakistan event on time. But thankfully, we are behind now, and I'll let the chair of the next session try and pull it back if he can. Andrew Wilder, who heads Afghanistan, Pakistan here, will be chairing the next session. Over to you.
Thank you, Moeed, and thank you all for coming. Also, a special thanks to George Mason University for working closely with us on organizing this event today. And a special word of thanks to Dr. Mehtab Karim and Moeed Yusuf from USIP for all the hard work that went into organizing this. We are behind schedule, so I'm going to be brief, introduce the next panelists for our next session on the topic of views of the Pakistan diaspora. And we have three very prominent members of the diaspora today with us today, so thank you very much for coming. We're going to start off with Mr. Irfan Malik, who is currently the president of the U.S.-Pakistan Foundation. Previously, many Pakistan-related positions here in Washington, D.C. area, including the executive director and later a board member of the Pakistan-American Public Affairs Committee. He's also been a board member of Organization of Pakistani Entrepreneurs. He's also previously held many positions on Howard County councils and committees. And he has an engineering degree from Monash University in Australia. So thank you for being with us today. Our next panelist will be Ms. Kulsum Lakhani, who is the founder and CEO of Invest to Innovate, or I2I, which supports early stage enterprises and strengthens access to capital and new markets. Prior to this, Kulsum was director of Social Vision, a venture philanthropy initiative. She was a founder editor of, is a founding editor of Changing Up Pakistan. We're on the World Economic Forum, Global Shaper, an entrepreneur, co-chair for Blended Profit. I mean, she's doing many things. You sound very busy. Kulsum has a BA from UVA and an MA in International Affairs and Conflict Resolution from George Washington's Elliott School of International Affairs. And last but not least, we're privileged to have Shamila Chowdhury with us again. Shamila is a senior fellow and Pakistan expert at the New America Foundation, as well as an analyst with the Eurasia Group's Asia practice. Prior to this, she was director for Afghanistan and Pakistan at the National Security Council in 2010 and 2011. Prior to that, she was State Department Policy Planning Staff, focusing on Afghanistan, Pakistan, and prior to that, with USAID, also working on Afghanistan, Pakistan-related issues from 2000 to 2004. So lots of very relevant experience working in the U.S. government. But we're privileged now that she doesn't have that hat on. She's much more free to share her views on many interesting topics with us. Shamila is a member of the World Economic Forum's Global Agenda Council on Pakistan, and she has her BA from University of Toledo and a master's in International Affairs from the American University School of International Service. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Mr. Irfan Malik. Moeed has told me to be very strict and give you each 10 minutes to present, and so please keep your remarks short so we have time for question and answer afterwards. So thank you very much. Whichever you prefer. Technologically beyond me, but can, okay. Help is on its way, I'm told, yeah. I'm one of those Luddites that we heard about at lunch.
This is the presentation?
Yeah, this is the one.
Okay.
Thank you, Andrew.
as Andrew mentioned, my name is Irfan Malik, and the current position I have is with US-Pak Foundation. So I'll briefly mention what I'm doing here so you get a flavor for what the diaspora is involved in, what are the issues that especially the youth over here are facing. And the organization that I'm with, US-Pak Foundation, we are a nationwide nonprofit organization, and our vision is to further the understanding and advancement of issues of interest to Pakistani Americans, both at national and state level. And we reach this out by empowering our youth. Our focus is mostly the Pakistani American youth over here in DC. And how we do this is through different programs, which is, youth leadership conferences, mentorship for college and high school students, internship placements, and youth surveys, and working with Pakistani student associations in different campuses. We try to highlight at these places different contributions that Pakistani Americans have made to the society here. We cover civil rights issues that the community what the community, what the diaspora is. This is from the 2010 census. Few people have differences with the numbers, so I'm not going to talk about the overall number, that there are about 410,000 Pakistani Americans in USA. Few people believe that it's much higher than that. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that it's a fast-growing segment of the population. And just as we have heard in the morning, a large number of the Pakistani American community here again are under the age of 17, or the youth that you may say. And the last point from a demographic standpoint that I would like to make is that a lot of them have accepted U.S. as their homeland, which shows up in their high naturalization rate and their immigration to U.S. It's also, on some of the numbers which I have not put in, shows that as well. By the way, these numbers are from a study that the Asian American Center did, and I have a brochure of my organization which has a lot of that information. So if anyone is interested, I have some of those here. The diaspora itself is very well educated. We have a high number of graduates. A lot of them are professionals, doctors, engineers, accountants, bankers, and a large number is self-employed as well. Our per capita income is about $24,600, which is slightly lower than the national income, which I believe is around $27,000. 15% of us live in poverty, 14% live in overcrowded homes. So what I'm trying to do is give you a picture of who we are and how close we are to the national averages. So we are a group, but as far as our economics, our education, we are pretty much fall in the bell curve of the U.S. national numbers. Now, getting down to the youth of Pakistan, Pakistani American over here, what issues do they face? Their main issue is cultural identity. They want to maintain their Pakistani American identity, and they have issues doing that. They have some civil rights and liberties issue. Bullying at schools and colleges is an upcoming thing. And then what they need is career guidance, employment and internship. Where do they go? How do they get a good job? How do somebody guides them what jobs to do, how to prepare themselves for those jobs at college and other places. They also have an issue about citizenship rights and responsibilities. And this is not much of an issue, but this is more of lack of information. They don't know their citizenship rights, nor do they know their citizenship responsibilities. So this thing has to go hand in hand, and somehow we need to bring them up on the curve on these both rights and responsibilities. And lastly, volunteerism. They are involved in the local mosque and other places, but they are not that much involved in the general society. And so there is a lack of volunteerism amongst the youth that we need to bring up. Now, as I mentioned, I mean, their cultural identity, they want to have some association with Pakistan. So, you know, what are those connections? And if I was to divide the group that we have here into, let's say, two different groups, one group, which is probably the majority, is very much concerned about Pakistan, and they want to help either from here or going back to Pakistan and you know, helping them there. There's also a group which doesn't want to associate with Pakistan, which don't want to even call themselves Pakistani-Americans. I mean, they may want to call themselves South Asians or something. So they are aloof of what's happening in Pakistan. The reason why I bring that up is that we cannot ignore them. They need a different approach, a different messaging for this second group. But today I'm going to talk more about the first group, which is, you know, in the majority and is concerned about Pakistan. So the question is, why reconnect? And I really would have liked to pose this question not to this audience, but I wish that there were a lot more younger people in the audience today, because it is not your reconnection that I'm worried about. It is the reconnection of the high schoolers, the college goers, university people, you know, that we have to plan or motivate them. So somehow, you know, I think the challenge we have for the group here, which is a very, you know, I mean, there's a lot of intellectual capacity in this room. The challenge for us is how to get those people in the room here, and we be in the background. And we are just, you know, clicking the slides and stuff like that. But have those people talk about how do they see reconnecting with Pakistan. But I'll still, since we don't have that, I'll make use of what you know, the audience we have, and which like I said, can be very useful. But it's just that at the end of the day, we have to have the consumer or the customer in place to make it happen. And that is the reason to do it is there's a growing population segment. I mean, they have similar issues. We heard with the DCM speak, you know, they have similar issues what the Americans, Pakistani Americans have. They are the leaders of tomorrow. I mean, we're living in a global village. And most importantly, we all get impacted by events in Pakistan or USA. Whether it is the Malala Yousafzai thing or somebody makes a movie, the youth in Pakistan and the youth in America, they both get equally impacted by it. Now, to make this happen, what resources do we have? In USA, I have listed some of them. You know, we have the PSAs, we have community organizations, we have the embassy, you know, and I won't go through all the details, but there all these resources are there. We just have to, you know, get programs at those places and make it happen. Now the question comes how to reconnect. It's nothing new. I mean, it's been done over and over and over again. We just have to do it for the Pakistani-American community. We just have to learn from the other communities, whether it's the Turkish, the Chinese, the Jewish, the British Pakistanis, any other community. We just have to see what they have done and do it in USA. The second thing I would say, it should not be an entirely US-based approach. As I mentioned, I would have liked to see young people here. You know, it's not right for us to go and tell the counterparts in Pakistan, this is what you need. We need to hear them. We need to learn from them what are their needs. The credibility of the messenger, that's very important. I mean, if we have somebody from the State Department saying something, it carries a different message. If we have somebody from the diaspora going to Pakistan and saying something, it carries a different message. And in that, I would also bring the demographic or the age group. If you have somebody like me saying something, carries a different message. If you have somebody from a high school or a college student telling a counterpart in Pakistan, it carries a different message. We can help in developing the message. We can help in developing the modes that are required. For messaging, what we can do is hold seminars and workshops, kind of like this, but with more higher youth participation. We can conduct video conferences both here and in Pakistan amongst the youth. Hear them out. What are they looking for? Social networking, we just heard that there are about 7.5 million Pakistani on Facebook. Why not use that tool? Why not use it more than just sharing photographs and telling them I'm doing good or I'm visiting USIP? Why not create Facebook pages for Malala Yousafzai? Why not make it an issue-based social networking thing? I mean, that's lacking. Those are the things that I think are needed. And again, you know, with the technologies there, we can exchange ideas between Pakistan and USA through blogs, through other means. A lot of Pakistani Americans travel to Pakistan. They can go and talk about their things when traveling there. But what I would suggest there is that instead of just talking to their family, it would be much better that they go out and talk to the public. State Department has few programs in that regard, Speakers Bureau and things like that. I think that's what's needed. Now, what modes should we develop to make this thing happen? We should develop some modes for volunteer work in Pakistan, something like Peace Corps. The issue there is security, but we have to overcome that. We have to develop internships in Pakistan, you know, engage NGOs in Pakistan and corporate Pakistani companies to be part of it. We have Teach USA. Why not have Teach Pakistan? Have kids over here who are in college or just have finished college, go and teach English. Simple things, you know, elementary math in Pakistan. The diaspora over here can create scholarships for Pakistani students to encourage them to go and study a semester in Pakistan. You know, have a student exchange program between different universities where they bring students here. There was a program, I don't know how well it is right now, a few years back, sponsored a high school from Pakistan. Many students did come to USA in their high school years and spent a year here. I have not heard much about it, but that is another area that, you know, we can do. I briefly mentioned the Speakers Bureau that State Department has started. I think that's another platform that can be used. And obviously the cultural exchange was also mentioned by DCM, that, you know, there are a lot of singers, there are a lot of, you know, writers, artists who are of Pakistani origin, and they are very popular. I mean, I attended an event here at Kennedy Center where they had this group, Noori, and there were about like 600 Pakistani Americans who were all younger than me. I was probably the only grandfather in that room. So, you know, I mean, there is an appetite by the Pakistani Americans of the Pakistani culture. We just have to, you know, do it. Now, I come to my last slide, which is I've tried to show here today that there is a need, and I've also tried to show that there is a desire. And I've also mentioned that there are resources. I think where we are is the implementation. That box is not checked. And I think through talks like this and through getting more youth involved, we can probably come up with that implementation part. And I'll take question and answer after that.
Yeah, thank you. Move on to you, Kosun.
Sure. Should I just get my presentation?
Yeah.
Hi everybody. First of all, thank you so much to George Mason and to USIP for having me here today. I'm just basically a girl that runs a startup company that's working with young Pakistanis in Pakistan. But I think so much of what we do and with Invest to Innovate really starts with my own story. And I think a lot of founders tell you that. When you really infuse your own values and your own cultures, your own culture into the culture of the organization. But I had been working in venture philanthropy before I started Eye to Eye, and working at really looking at the seed level of supporting young entrepreneurs in Pakistan, sustainable initiatives, and a lot of really cool innovations that were happening at the community development level. I also, as Andrew mentioned, I've run a blog on Pakistan, and I was interviewing tons of filmmakers and entrepreneurs and change makers. And the number one thing that I kept hearing over and over again when I was in Pakistan, and I go back and forth very regularly, and our team is in Pakistan right now, but one thing that I kept hearing over and over again from young Pakistanis that had these amazing innovative ideas to create social change, to make viable business models that could really scale, was that they couldn't get the resources or the capital to start. And so what's been really interesting is we talk about, I mean, specifically I work in social enterprise, but I kind of hate that term. I think we're working with businesses that can really scale, and we're thinking about how those can be really viable. And I think you can't really scale social change unless you're a viable business model. So, but a lot of times people talk about there's a $1 trillion investment opportunity in the sector of impact-oriented businesses. And yet at the same time, we see investors that are investing in later stage businesses when they're ready to scale, but not when they're ready to start. So as a result, in untapped markets, which is really what Eye to Eye does, but we're focused in Pakistan right now, is that you meet so many entrepreneurs that have amazing ideas, but they just can't start. And as a result, you're seeing a huge problem with the pipeline. You're not seeing a lack of deal flow for investors later on in the pipeline. But so basically, for us, like that was something that was really interesting and something that I kept hearing over and over again. And when you're dealing with the population, 60% of Pakistan lives under $2 a day, and 2/3 of the country is under 30 years old. And that's something that's been talked about a lot today, I'm sure. You just have a huge population in the country that really wants to change the environment around them. So really Invest to Innovate in terms of the solution that we're providing, and we're exactly a year old. We just turned a year old last month. But Invest to Innovate is an intermediary organization. We're really addressing the capital gap as well as the resource gap. And what we do is we support early stage entrepreneurs in new markets, beginning in Pakistan, and we're strengthening access to capital, which sounds like a lot of jargon that I just threw out at you. So I'll just tell you a little bit more about what we do and bring it back to the diaspora, because that's a really important component of that as well. And so in our first step in what we do is we identify seed stage entrepreneurs. We tend to work with a lot of young entrepreneurs in Pakistan. Our entrepreneurs pretty much range from early 20s to their mid 30s, but we're developing a lot of local partnerships, specifically with university level incubators, which are really coming up around the country right now. IBA, the Institute of Business Administration in Karachi, has a really amazing Center for Entrepreneurial Development, which taps into a consortium of 8 universities around the country, so that these young students can actually get the same mentors and technical skills that that people in Karachi or the bigger universities can get. So for us, that's one of our feeder partnerships, but we're also working with business plan competitions, looking at local social innovation funds, and looking at how are we actually finding and vetting the most young and most high potential businesses. A lot of them tend to work in the agriculture and energy sector, which is something that we've been seeing a lot in our application process. And so we identify and vet them, and vetting is actually a very important part. Our due diligence process is something that we really take pride in developing, and that really feeds into the diaspora, but really showing credibility in our organization and showing transparency. We provide capacity development support to grow these businesses. We're about to launch an accelerator program next month, which is basically a 4-month program of monthly 2-day workshops that are really geared towards entrepreneurs that are at the point of implementation. Entrepreneurs that are looking for between $50,000 to $200,000 that are really implementing their models on the ground, but need to learn how to build good governance structures. How are they actually doing valuations of their companies? How are they negotiating term sheets? How do they actually factor in exit strategies, since those of us who work in emerging markets know that exit strategies is a really hard thing in terms of investment. But also, how are they measuring their social impact? What does it mean to actually increase the income of households? How are they working with these low-income farmers, as an example? And how are they building the distribution channels to reach the most amount of people possible in the long term? At the end of the 4 months, we were building an angel investor community, which is something I'm going to talk about towards the end when we're going back in terms of our talk on the diaspora. Our angel investor community and our angel funding community is something that we want to build as a network of providing seed funding to these entrepreneurs at the end of the 4 months. The 4 months that we put them through is really a boot camp, like it's an MBA program boot camped into 4 months of really getting them investment ready, but also getting them to grow their businesses in those 4 months. We like our angels to actually stay involved as mentors, and that's the real aim here, is like how do we actually get people in the diaspora as well as people within local Pakistani networks to be mentors and provide an emotional investment in that way before they actually provide a financial investment. And in that way, how are they actually seeing these businesses grow from A to B? And in order to, in us doing that, we're actually measuring our entrepreneurs' growth and positioning them for scale in the long term by supporting them at the seed stage part of the pipeline. Sorry. So for us, it's really about this. It's thinking about the bigger picture. I think a lot of people say that they're an accelerator program, they're doing this, they're doing that. But for me, when I started, I was much more interested in the big picture. I was really interested in how are we actually looking at why entrepreneurs aren't starting? Why are we looking at entrepreneurs why aren't they scaling? Why aren't we asking these bigger questions? And in a place like Pakistan where there's so much happening on the ground, and that's not the perception that we get here in the US, but there's so much energy, there's so many efforts that are happening. How do we bring all those stakeholders to the same table in order to actually achieve growth in the most tangible and concrete way? And so for us, it's really about providing this intermediary role, but at the same time, providing the right partnerships to bring all those stakeholders to the table. I can talk more about our enterprises in the question and answer, but we have 6 right now. These are 5. We're about to approve the 6th. That will be part of our accelerator program next month. These entrepreneurs are working in the agriculture, energy, livelihood space. They're doing everything from working with citizen journalists in Pakistan to working with small dairy farmers and working on the distribution and transportation side of the value chain and looking at how to really modernize that. For those that are familiar with the ag sector of Pakistan, we're the 4th largest producer of dairy, but we're a net importer of dairy. So the amount that we can actually try to innovate and modernize that is huge, and the potential for that is huge. And because, as anyone knows who visits Pakistan, energy is a huge issue there. Most of us live in quasi-darkness all the time. So looking at off-grid communities and how we can provide biogas solutions or solar energy solutions, wind, energy, and power like that. We're seeing a lot of young entrepreneurs come up with really cool and amazing ideas that are really homegrown. So the Angel Network kind of brings it back to the broader topic of this panel. The Angel Network was really conceived because I really felt that there needed to be, and our team really felt like there needed to be a community of funders and investors in Pakistan, as well as outside of Pakistan. As we know, and we're on this panel talking about the diaspora, there's so many remittances that go back. It was $11.1 billion last year, and remittances have actually quadrupled in the last 8 years. So despite the fact that Pakistan, in terms of perception, but also the security situation, has become increasingly more volatile, the fact that Pakistanis have increasingly sent more money back home doesn't necessarily mean that remittances are going to be transferred overnight to enterprises, but it means that there's a huge development opportunity to really engage this community. One thing that I've noticed in a lot of the conversations that I had and a lot of the qualitative conversations that I was having with the entrepreneurs that are part of the diaspora, as well as just people that are driving taxis in the U.S. or people that are doing sending money back home, there's a huge trust deficit with the diaspora. A lot of them don't believe that they're going to send money home and it's going to go to the right place. And why should we blame them either at the same time? And so thinking about how are we creating the modes of transparency in order to actually funnel money to the right places. And so for us in our process, the reason why our due diligence process and our selection process is so careful, why we're trying to build organizations that can provide third-party approval on our applications, why our due diligence is like talking to experts in the field to provide that type of support, is because we really want to provide transparency through the process. So we really believe that our way of leveraging the diaspora is through this due diligence process and building credibility, but also building a community among the diaspora, people that are really interested in supporting young entrepreneurs, and that's not going to be everybody. And how do we actually get them to get the touch and feel of the entrepreneurs that they're working with? I think the 4-month accelerator program that we're about to launch is going to end in a pitch event in Pakistan. So stay tuned for that. But And so while our investors in the room that are going to be in Pakistan and our funders are in the room are going to be in Pakistan, they'll be able to engage and talk to the entrepreneurs in person, thinking about how we can leverage technology to really create that touch and feel that people in the diaspora might not necessarily have with entrepreneurs in Pakistan. How can we create telepresence and use telepresence technology to create live pitch events? How can we potentially bring Pakistani entrepreneurs here in terms of a showcase? How can we tell the stories that are positive, that will get people excited, inspired, but also know that they're actual viable, tangible business models that are behind that. So that's really kind of our broader vision. The angel community is something that we're still building right now, but we're hoping that as the cycle continues and as we build credibility in Pakistan and outside of it, that we can really start to engage the diaspora in a really concrete way. So thanks.
Thanks, Kulsum. Shamila.
Thanks, Andrew. I'd like to thank USIP and George Mason for organizing this very full agenda. These are issues I think that they deserve a lot more attention than they get. The news tends to be very security heavy on Pakistan. I'm guilty of that. I've been working on national security issues for the past few years, so my bread and butter is there, but this is really, these are the issues that we need to focus on for the future and sustain our attention there. I'm supposed to talk about opportunities for Pakistani Americans in government. Right now I'm not in the government anymore. As Andrew mentioned, I spent almost 12 years there. What I'd like to do is actually expand that focus and just talk about opportunities in foreign affairs, policy work for Pakistani Americans. What I have to say probably would affect other immigrant communities as well, but I want to tailor it to the Pakistani American community, my own experience. Which I think has been fairly unique as a Pakistani American who's worked on U.S.-Pakistan relations. And then if there's some interest in talking about specific ways to get into the government, opportunities there, maybe we can save that for the question and answer session. I don't want to bore everyone with that. I think the most important thing here, well, actually, before I start talking, who here considers themselves a Pakistani American youth? Raise your hand. Moeed's not raising his hand. His age is slightly ambiguous to us. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna raise my hand too. Okay, that's good to know. So this conversation is for you, but also if there are parents in the audience who have children in high school and college, this is also for you, because the career path and talking about what you do for your future and how you get paid. I mean, I think this is a family affair, especially in the Pakistani American community. So I'm glad that I see different faces here. First, let me talk about role models, and then I'll go into my own personal experience. I think it's really important to have role models in the career path that you choose. I chose a career path that was focused on foreign affairs, foreign policy within the U.S. establishment. There were not actually a lot of people when I started that looked like me that were doing this type of work. And that was a very stark kind of thing that I noticed. It was very obvious. And in a lot of ways that was difficult for me because most of my peers were going into medicine and engineering and law, and those were considered good professions because there was a guaranteed income. And so there was this model minority identity that the community was trying to preserve. And so I was victim to that. I started out as an English major and called myself pre-law, and I quickly changed. But I think the importance of role models is it needs to be focused on more because you need to see people that look like you and that are acting like you and that have the same experiences to know that you can do that as well. And the most obvious example I can cite is when President Obama became president. And I noticed that, I was at the State Department at the time, and I noticed that me and some of my friends who, we all happen to be minorities, this group of us that were talking, and we started talking about how we liked how President Obama said this, and we liked how he acted with these people, and we really appreciated that he made this point. It had nothing to do with his background as an African American or his personal identity. It was just how he was conducting business. And then it struck me that we, within this foreign policy community, we as a minority, minorities didn't have enough role models that we could look to and emulate. So I think that's something important to consider. And so in sharing my story, I hope that I can give some of you an example of a path that you could take. I was actually born in Pakistan. My family is from Punjab. I came to the States when I was 2 in 1979, and my uncle was a doctor in Ohio. He sponsored our whole family to come. And my parents were both educated, went to graduate school. My mother was an economist, father was a lawyer. They were part of this first generation of South Asians that came after the immigration legislation in the U.S. had expanded. So we really benefited from something that was very American, right? This expanded legislation on immigration. So that was good. I grew up in Ohio. Studied English literature and women's studies, actually. And I thought I would go to law school, but I also just wanted to take time to read books and read stories that I was interested in. And part of me was not really organized. I didn't know what it would lead me into. But it was actually my interest in literature that got me involved in international affairs. I started reading about the immigrant experience, South Asia, post-colonial literature, and decided that I wanted to do something more active and that would impact people. And so I moved to Washington in 1999. I attended graduate school at American University, and I did my master's there. And I focused on Pakistan. There was not a very strong Pakistan program there, but I found, professors that could help me. I had a Boren Fellowship, which was, it's a fellowship that encourages, or it gives you financial support, basically, to focus on regions and languages that are relevant to national security. After the Cold War, a lot of the funding for language studies and regional studies dried up because no one thought it was important. And this all came back. And remember, this was pre-9/11 that I was in grad school. So Pakistan was on the list, but it was more like China, Iran, Russia. These countries were important. But it was a novelty. A Pakistani-American working on Pakistan and interested in policy. There still were not a lot of people like me doing this. And I sort of fell into government work. I worked at USAID as a contractor for about 4 years, and then landed a job through the Boren Fellowship at the State Department. So if there are people here interested about the Boren, I can talk to you one-on-one about that later. It's a great opportunity, but it's a good way to get into the government. And so I landed a job working on Indonesia, was not working on anything related to Pakistan, and did economic policy work. I joke and I tell my friends that I had taken one econ class in my life and I got a C-, but the State Department still hired me. So maybe I shouldn't be saying that publicly. I don't want the State Department to look bad. It's being filmed. But I think it just goes to show you, I had an English literature background. It just goes to show you that when you're interested in policy work, your academic training is not always the most important thing. I mean, you can be dropped into any issue, country, and need to figure out how to work it out. And I think that's something, that flexibility is something that's required if you're interested in this type of work. But once I got into the State Department, I managed to find my way to the Pakistan desk, applied for a job there, got it, and that's sort of when my whole world got turned upside down, working on Pakistan issues, which I'd always wanted to do. I was offered a job on Secretary Clinton's policy planning staff, and then eventually went over to the National Security Council. And I've been really fortunate to have a very rewarding experience in the U.S. government. When I was at the White House, President Obama was going to call President Zardari to have a phone conversation. I was able to brief the president, tell him what to say. I wrote his talking points. I was able to go with National Security Advisor Jim Jones to Pakistan after, you'll all remember Faisal Shahzad, a Pakistani-American, tried to, there was a bomb in Times Square, and luckily it didn't go off, but we went to Pakistan after that to talk about that with General Kiani and the government. I got to go to Afghanistan with Secretary Clinton, and when I worked on Indonesia after the tsunami happened, I accompanied Colin Powell to the embassy of Indonesia here to sign the condolence book. But before I could do all of that, and keep in mind, by the time I got to the White House, I had been in the government for 12 years. Before I was able to do that, there was a lot of other important policy work that had to be done, such as stapling papers, escorting foreign visitors to their meetings with my bosses at the State Department, drafting talking points, making sure that the Indonesian flag was right side up during a climate change meeting that we had, and also figuring out if we could offer food during a meeting with some Muslim diplomats during Ramadan. Some of them weren't fasting, some of them were, and what would be the appropriate thing to do. So I'm making this comparison because I want you to know that policymaking is quite varied, the work of it. And so to be a policymaker, to be good at this, you also have to be just as varied in terms of your skills. I've seen a lot of young people, and so this is for you young people in the audience who are interested in working in policy. A lot of folks come to Washington after having completed very prestigious degree programs, and many think that this is what it takes and you'll get what you want, but that just gets you in the door in Washington. There's a lot more that you need in terms of interpersonal skills, creating a community of experts around you, peers, like-minded experts. You have to have a lot of kind of good people skills to survive here. And then also working in the government is, it's a huge bureaucracy. And so they tend to be very ambiguous and very specific at the same time. So again, a lot of flexibility you need. And I want to go back to the thing about role models. I encourage you all to seek those role models out. They don't have to be of the same background as you, but people who maybe had similar kind of issues that they had to deal with or experiences. I wouldn't have gotten to where I am without role models and mentors along the way. And if you have the opportunity to also mentor someone who is younger than you or doesn't have the same amount of experience, I think that's really important in Washington as well. So I want to talk about a few kind of more political issues now. You may have noticed that there is a lot of diversity in the government these days. I don't want to be too political, but this administration is interested in kind of getting people from different backgrounds, views, and experiences. And I think that's a good thing. I'm a firm believer in public service, but it's especially good for the Pakistani-American community because it gives us opportunities to influence in ways that we have never, as a community, been able to influence. As I mentioned, a lot of the community is associated with more traditional disciplines, science, medicine, math. And if this community wants to have an impact on politics and policy, it has to be involved at a professional level, not just a personal level. And I think the September 11th attacks were kind of a wake-up call for a lot of folks. There's some people who had been active in politics before then, but afterwards I think they really kind of woke up to the need here. And other diaspora groups have been doing this for a long time. Irfan's presentation alluded to this. And some of these communities, they have the added advantage of just being larger, and they have more money because of being larger. But the Pakistani-American community can get there. It's going to take some time and some effort, but I think that we'll be able to make it work. When you work on policy, specifically foreign affairs, there are still special obstacles that you're going to face for those of us who have an identifiable ethnic background. So what am I talking about? Identity politics reigns supreme in a lot of the countries that you work on when you're doing foreign policy. It's different than when you work on domestic issues in the United States, and your identity is a big factor in how people perceive your message. And you can sometimes accidentally be viewed as a mouthpiece for special interests that you don't necessarily advocate. So this is just kind of based on my own experience. Yesterday I did a panel at the Middle East Institute on what is the likelihood of a peace deal with the Taliban. So it was an Afghanistan issue. And there was a gentleman in the audience. Before I even spoke, he came up to me and he asked me if I was which view I was representing, if it was a pro-Pakistan view, right? And then he looked at my name and he said, okay, Sharmila. He said my name wrong, of course. Sharmila is an Indian name. And he said, no, your name's Shamila. Then you must be Muslim, right? So he kind of kept digging to find out what parts of my identity were going to influence my view. And I had to remind him that, I was working in the U.S. government, and I'm sharing my experiences as a former policymaker. But I don't think it really mattered to him at the end of the day. So it's just something to be aware of. That and it's a unique experience, and it happens, I think, to other immigrant communities and people with different backgrounds as well. But there's specific issues that you're going to have to face. So identity politics will be part of it, and so we should realize kind of the advantages and the limitations that are posed on our professional paths because of that. And then I would say, finally, it's good that there's diversity in the government, and it's good that there are people who say Pakistani Americans working on Pakistan policy in the U.S. government. There's nothing wrong with that, but I think that we have to be aware that cultural literacy will only take you so far, and then you have to be still professionally capable overall of working on those issues. So don't it's an advantage, but don't just pursue a certain path because of that. You need to kind of back yourself up as well, and it's something that I've learned along the way. I think I'll stop there. If there are questions, we can.
Good. No, thanks. First of all, to our speakers for keeping the time, which has left us about a half an hour for question and answer, and we've covered a wide variety of topics here, so I'm hoping we get a lot of good questions now to follow up. Let's start with the gentleman in the back. Although I should probably, after Irfan's comments, only allow people under who categorize as youth to ask any questions, but I'm sure you're quite youthful.
Yeah, Sharmila, my question is about identity politics. In last election, like a couple of years ago, I was working on Bob Ehrlich's campaign in Maryland, and I called many Pakistani Americans, and they didn't want to even listen about Republican Party. They were so upset. And I wondered that, what is your experience with Pakistani American community when you deal with them? They are like Jewish and African American vote, that they are unconditional with Democrat Party, and they don't want to listen about Republican Party. What is the problem there? Thanks.
I'd like to take maybe 3 questions, and then we'll go to the panel for some answers. Yes?
Although having served 4 to 5 years with Pakistan Commerce Ministry and one of the negotiators doing the post like 9/11 trade negotiations with USA, I fail to understand why United States government is very, I'm sorry to use this non-diplomatic word, miser on giving trade concessions to Pakistan while very open to give aid to Pakistan.
And
Hi, my name is Dave. I think under certain definitions I might be a youth, but I'm not Pakistani. I don't know if you can. I don't know if you can tell. I am Jewish, however, which again I don't look like that either. And I was very interested to hear both of you, remark on obviously some of the similarities, which I can see quite well. My grandparents came over from Europe, and I'm wondering. I'd like to hear specifically how you could see the American Pakistani diaspora working with the Jewish community. Because I can tell you, I very often go to the Jewish version of this panel, and I hear a lot of talking about some of our successful models and how we would like to see other communities replicate them. And then sometimes when I have personal conversations with folks, I get kind of some pushback on there are differences between our communities and we don't really think that would work. And I'm very interested in seeing it happen, and would like to hear specifics on how you think that relationship would work.
Okay, let's go back to our panelists, and I'll leave it up to you, whichever questions you'd like to respond to. Do you want to start off, Irfan?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start. I'll probably take, if it's okay, the first and the third. The first and the third questions, I mean. As far as the Republican-Democratic alienation or affiliation, I think both parties are supported by Pakistani-American community. About 2-3 decades ago, a majority of the Pakistani-Americans were Republican. Over the years, that thing has shifted for various reasons that we are not going to discuss here today. We don't have the time. But right now, there are more Democrats, Pakistani-Americans than there are Republicans. But they are still in both camps. So I think to say that they are all in one is not right. They are in both camps. And lastly, to the working with the Jewish community, there's a lot of work that is going on, and there's a lot that we can learn from the Jewish community. The problem we have on both sides of the Muslim and the Jewish community is that we spend more time talking about each other than talking to each other. And I think that's where the problem is on both sides. I have personally, I've been involved with many interfaith activities with Jewish organization in Baltimore and America, in Washington, D.C. And we do, I mean, like they come and they ask us to participate in leadership training for the Jewish youth in this place. We hold various, seminars, and not just on religious basis, but if there is a geopolitical thing that comes up in Israel, we have held seminars at our homes discussing those things. So it's again like bring it out in the open. It's okay to agree to disagree. So it is happening. It needs to happen more. But I think there is a need that is being felt by both groups. And there are elements in both groups that want to see that happen.
Just a really quick comment. David, I think we've talked about this before. One thing that I think that the Jewish community in the U.S. does really well, specifically in this area, is that they award a Jewish guy and girl of the week. It's been our joke because I've been trying, I was like, I would love to have something similar, or Pakistani girl of the week. But one thing that I think is a really cool lesson from that is just how I think the Jewish community in that sense celebrates people that are doing well. And I think there needs to be, we talked about role models, I think there needs to be more of a celebration of positives and people that are doing really well in the community. Like, how can we provide that as inspiration for other people? That being said, it's always hard because I think every diaspora is so nuanced. Like, no diaspora is like monolithic at all. Like, there's so many different camps, like even in the Jewish camp in the US and overseas, and in the Pakistani community as well as in the Muslim community, it's like such a nuanced diaspora. But I do think one thing that's a really interesting lesson is like, how do we actually celebrate the heroes and people that are doing good work in a way that's not, because I always feel that Pakistanis can be our worst enemies in terms of when people are doing well, the people that bring you down the first is other Pakistanis. And so, and I noticed that even, I think there's a lot of lessons we can even pull from the Irish diaspora. And people in Ireland. And when I was there, I actually learned a lot from just the Irish community and the people that had come from Ireland, from the U.S. back to Ireland to do a lot of investment work. And it was actually a similar thing. They said, Irish people don't ever say that they're doing well because people pull them down automatically. And so I think there needs to be a change in that. Like, I think we need to change our attitudes towards that. We need to pull people up rather than pulling people down. And I think that's a really good lesson from that.
I will vote for you for Pakistani Girl of the Week.
Oh my gosh, first one. Totally.
What if I want to be?
1 week for me, 1 week for you. There's enough weeks for the year for all.
I'll address your question and also the trade one. I guess that's maybe targeted me since I used to work in the government, but I will not speak for the U.S. government. I'll tell you what I think though. On I think the coexistence narrative is really interesting. I've seen it work really well in smaller cities. I think in Washington it's hard because there's such large immigrant communities here that they're kind of working within themselves because they're so complex and they've got subgroupings, right? And they've got plenty of political issues to work on. Like I said, I'm from Toledo, Ohio, and there's a large Jewish community there that came after the war, refugees. They've been there for a while, and there's a fairly large Pakistani-American community that's been growing since the 70s. It's part of the Muslim community. It's a great relationship, actually. And when I would go to my Islamic Center for Sunday school, every year we would go to the synagogue and we'd already gone. We didn't need to see what it looked like, but it was just to keep the relationship going and to talk to each other about the issues that both communities face. And it still continues to this day. So I think a lot of that dialogue is happening within a religious context, right? The interfaith context, and maybe it does need to be expanded more to these cultural issues or educational issues, offering support, because I think the Jewish community is a great example of like role models, professional support, kind of integrating and building political influence. So there's a lot to be learned. There was just I'm sure people saw the Islamic Center in Toledo. Actually, there was a bomb there last weekend, and what happened was, after that, the interfaith community came together, and there's a ton of Pakistani Americans at that community. Interfaith community came together. There was a billboard that a Baptist church bought saying, "Protect your fellow Muslim friends." I mean, this happens a lot in smaller cities. I've heard not good stories in larger cities, but anyway, that's just my 2 cents there. On the trade issues, I mean, this is a long-standing concern of the Pakistani government, and people in Pakistan often say that aid doesn't really help us. We would appreciate the trade agenda to expand. There's a lot of domestic obstacles to that, as you are well aware of, and Pakistan does not rank high in terms of the domestic trade agenda. And the trade policy overall for the U.S. government right now is fairly stalled. I'm not an expert on that, but I would say that I wouldn't expect it to expand too much when it comes to Pakistan, given the state of relations and the difficult nature of support in Congress for U.S.-Pakistan relations. But a lot of it is just domestic. I don't think it's even crunching the numbers and saying we don't have a lot to benefit from here. I think it's just certain states don't want it because they see it as a threat. So.
Could I say Shmila picked up many diplomatic skills while she worked in government too. So, sorry, one here and then here. Sorry, go.
I came in a little bit late, as I seem to do. I was caught outside by others that wanted to talk about the good news that I brought up. And I saw Irfan, your slide about the Peace Corps, and it caught my eye right away because I'm a former Peace Corps volunteer, and I went through Pakistan in 1967 while I was a volunteer in Nepal. Spent time there with my Pakistani Peace Corps friends. Peace Corps was there for many, many years. Hundreds and hundreds of volunteers were there. And right now we're in a culture of paranoia, mutual paranoia. 9/11 made Americans paranoid about security, and now security is just everywhere, and it's crunching and crushing this country, and it's largely self-imposed. It's mostly based on non-reality. The same is true on the other side. We went and invaded Iraq and created a whole climate of paranoia in the Arab world that American is our anti-Islam, anti-Arab, et cetera, et cetera. So we got to deal with this mutual paranoia. And the better we talk about it, as you're talking about, youth is one of the great ways to do this. And I did do my legacy study looking back 50 years, and at the campus of Faisalabad University, you'll find the basketball courts, well used, built by the Peace Corps volunteers who were there. And, and that you're not going to get the Peace Corps back there now. The paranoia is still too great. But there are hundreds of returned Peace Corps volunteers from Pakistan who are living here who would love to go back, who are not paranoid, and I think we could start with former volunteers and those Fulbrights too, on both sides. I feel perfectly safe when I'm in Pakistan. I'm not always feeling safe when I walk through certain parts of Washington, D.C. I'm not sure if more people get killed in Washington, D.C. on an average night as get killed anywhere in Pakistan. I think that Karachi is a pretty tough place. But I felt totally safe in Islamabad, and I know that I felt totally safe in Lahore. And, things happen. I felt totally safe in Faisalabad and other places. So, we just have to start doing these things. And one of the places to start might be those that have actually been there, done that, and got the T-shirt. So that might be a starting point.
As someone who grew up in Pakistan and then Lyalpur, now Faisalabad, and played basketball on that court, I'd like to thank you for making it.
Right. I can tell you it's in good shape. By the way,
Naseem.
I just want to say yet again that there are very few conferences one goes to and you walk away with this notion of value added, and this is one conference that I really think is, for me personally, is value added, because this is new stuff, important stuff, and this panel has been tremendous. I think that in some ways you people are really going to be the pillars of Pakistan-US relations in the coming years. It's very crucial what you're doing. Just to actually pick up from what was said earlier on, I think that the relations, and especially at the public level as well, are very, in a bad spot, to put it mildly. The work that you're doing, Kulsum, do you see any kind of spin-off of that in terms of creating a better dialogue between Pakistan and the United States? Because really, if there was going to be, and let me be very blunt, if there was going to be a white American go out there and be doing this kind of work, it will still be looked at with suspicion, because this is the kind of environment we are in right now. Hopefully we'll cross this hump, but somebody like you doing this kind of work, going from the United States, the message that you can take, are you seeing this kind of thing working out? Or do you focus on that at all?
Cool. Two more questions here. One more question here, then go back to the panel, then we'll come back to
one more round of questions.
Thank you very much, Mahtab Karim here. Thanks, gentlemen, for talking about Peace Corps. I think one idea should be what George Mason University has just entered, signed an agreement, MOU with National University of Science and Technology in Islamabad, sending students from here. And we are aiming at Pakistani parents who would be willing to send students there for a year and getting students from there to George Mason University. I think that kind of exchange will help younger people knowing each other's country. But I think talking about Peace Corps, my estimate is that about 100,000 young Pakistani-Americans who are here out of 410,000 you showed here. And I think if Mr. Irfan Malik, if you can zero down on them and try to build a Peace Corps out of Pakistani-American youth, that could be something. They won't be scared of going there, and I think Kulsum could also help in that. Thank you.
Okay, we'll come back to the panel, and then we'll start the next round of questions with you. But just on that Fulbright point, I know the DCM mentioned it at lunch that the largest Fulbright program in the world today is Pakistanis coming to America, which I think is fantastic. What is not fantastic, though, is that there's no Americans now going to Pakistan on Fulbright. And as someone who did his PhD research in Pakistan on a Fulbright grant, I think it's a real tragedy that that whole program was stopped very prematurely. And I think there's a whole generation of, now we really only have the diaspora community in America who are sort of interested in understanding Pakistan. There's not many others who are actually have the ability to actually go and study and learn more about Pakistan. But anyway, back to our panel. And then we'll have time for one more round of questions.
Yeah, just a quick comment on that. I think Dave's in the room. Atlas Corps is kind of the reverse Peace Corps right now, which isn't Americans going to Pakistan, but they have like they just got a huge grant from the U.S. Embassy. Can I announce that? In Islamabad. I just announced it anyway. Bringing... It's public. Bringing Pakistanis to the U.S. And then there's obviously Teach for Pakistan right now, which is operating on the ground, which is like Teach for America, but it's bringing a lot of Pakistani-Americans to Pakistan. So there are efforts that are happening. It's obviously happening a little bit more slowly. There was Impact that was going on for a couple of years. It since has died down, but they're looking at a resurgence, I think. But it was bringing, again, Pakistani-Americans that wanted to go to Pakistan, that wanted to serve and wanted to work there. So thinking about some of the constraints that are there. In terms of the question about what we're doing and how that could potentially create some sort of dialogue. I think there's a really interesting window of opportunity right now in Pakistan with the U.S. I think a lot of people are realizing that more traditional approaches of aid aren't necessarily working out, but a lot of people are, and I don't know whether this is a good thing, but entrepreneurship has become very sexy. And so everyone wants to get onto that big platform of saying like, we're involved in this. And so as a result, I don't know whether it's because it's a window of opportunity. I like to think it's because I'm really authentic about what I do. I believe very much and very deeply in what I do. And I hope that translates to people, that I'm not in it for any kind of shady reasons or anything like that, because I genuinely want to support enterprise development, and especially among youth in Pakistan. But I think because of that window of opportunity, the conversation has just shifted. It just means that we've been given a bigger mouthpiece to be able to do what we do. It means that the stakeholders are coming more easily to the table than they were before. Just the fact that like IBA, basically their professors have been trained through Babson, the MIT Enterprise Forum via Open is doing a lot of really amazing work. There's so many people that are doing amazing work right now, and everyone's starting to talk to each other, which I think is a really powerful thing. So I don't believe that I don't operate as an individual. I don't operate believing that we're the only person in the space. And so I think because we work so collaboratively with everybody, I think that's given us a little bit more legitimacy, I hope. And I hope that continues. So.
Do you have any numbers at the other end? I mean, how many entrepreneurs are involved right now?
So right now we're working with six enterprises that are going to go through our accelerator program. We've gotten a number more applications. I just judged the business plan competition that happened at IBA. I judged the social entrepreneur track, and there were, I mean, I can't give you numbers, but the numbers of there were so many ideas that were coming out. It's just a matter of harnessing it and figuring out where to take them from there. And so in terms of numbers, it's really hard anywhere to kind of give a market size of like what entrepreneurship really looks like in a space, especially because a lot of people don't call themselves entrepreneurs that really are, and vice versa. And so I think that the potential is huge. I mean, Pakistan, any Pakistani knows that it's a very entrepreneurial society. It's just a matter of figuring out how to harness it in the most concrete and constructive way possible.
I just want to respond to this comment. Several people have said it, that we want Pakistani Americans to go to Pakistan and do work there, contribute to development. I think that's good for the sake of development, but for the purpose of improving relations between the two countries, I think we also have to think of creative ways to get Americans who are not Pakistani backgrounds to go out there. That's very critical. I know security is an issue. We have to think creatively about it. I haven't thought about it myself, but it's something that I dealt with personally when I was working in the government. When I would meet with Pakistani diplomats, they didn't really want to see me. They wanted to see a real American face, right? So this is a different dynamic, of course. They're diplomats, but they would ask me, oh, your family's from Gujarat. We know those people. We don't want to talk to you, you know? But I think just in terms of just, in influencing Americans, and I talk to Americans who, they read the news. I mean, people who've never been to Pakistan, they see the news, and the access to information is fairly limited, and it's a one-sided discussion. So I think we have to think creatively. I don't know what those creative solutions are, but we have to find ways to work around this security situation.
Just really quick, I think. Sorry.
Just get Irfan response, and we'll go back to the. For a final round of questions.
Yeah, I think some of the things have been answered about the Peace Corps. What I meant was a model like that, and I think it should be geared more towards the youth. I mean, Kulsum mentioned this program Impact. It was there. The security is the dominant issue right now. When I talk to parents that, well, would you be willing to send your child to Pakistan for a summer break or winter break? I think the questions they ask me about security, and for me to personally assure that security is very difficult. So that's our challenge. And as far as the exchange program, student exchange program between universities, I think that's what we need. We need more than that. We don't need just one program. We need a lot more programs where students from Pakistani universities can come in and spend a semester here, and vice versa. And what we also need is that many things that are happening, we don't know about it. There are, I think, close to about 200 high school students from Pakistan that are visiting USA right now through some State Department program. But where do they go? Who do they meet? We don't know much about it. So these things have to be broadcasted through social networks or whatever, so that people, the diaspora and other people, know about it and meet those students and have them meet, as I said, when they come from Pakistan, have them meet their counterparts, young students, the Pakistan Student Associations and colleges, have them meet those folks rather than a briefing at with some high level of officials.
Okay, I promised you the first.
Thank you very much. I support Zara what she mentioned about the very positive notes we are hearing since morning about Pakistan and Pakistani youth. Really, this is a very positive conference, very optimistic presentations and the proposal that you have been launching in Pakistan. My only suggestion, comment would be that, as you know, Pakistan is a very diversified country. There are so many geographic areas. I think we need to develop some institutional linkages in universities and other civil society organizations, instead of focusing on the well-endowed institutions like LUMS or IBA. We need to go out to the periphery and see how, for example, University of Gujarat, where I come from, is in the rural area. There are similarly other universities that are institutions that are there in Pakistan. So my suggestion to be this good tradition that you're establishing, you should go out and start developing some incubation centers in universities so that they could start mobilizing young entrepreneurs. Because I don't have anything to offer to my graduates when they finish MBA degree. Where will they go? Very few jobs available, especially if you're coming from the public sector university, the rural areas. So I think you need to find a way to engage them, involve them, and that way your good work can be spread out faster, and there'll be much more dividend from that work that you're doing.
Back here.
Hi, Jamina Siddiqui from NDI. First, Shamila, thank you. It's nice to know there's someone else from a small town in the Midwest and the South that can actually come to DC and do well, because I grew up in Tennessee and came here around the same time you did. And my question is for Kulsum. Are you connecting your entrepreneurs and your enterprises to other regional startups or scale-ups, or are you connecting them back to startups here in the U.S.? Regional, so within South Asia, are you making any networks and connections? And then just outside of the mentors that you have in the diaspora community, are you connecting them to entrepreneurs here?
Bleed in back.
Thank you for letting me jump the line. My question is for Shumaila, and this is something very close to my heart in some ways, because I basically live through this every day, and you touched upon it, but I want to ask you what the perspective from government is. And I don't necessarily say this too often because it may sound politically incorrect, but it is a reality. You talked about this gentleman showing up to you and saying, what is your name and where you're from? I unfortunately don't have the luxury of saying I've worked in the US government for 12 years. The question then becomes the biggest drawback I find being in Washington and doing what I'm doing is that I know a little bit of nuance about Pakistan. That's the biggest drawback. I much rather be at 30,000 feet, say black and white, good, bad, ugly, and thank you very much. As soon as you get into nuance, and I find this talking to government people as well as non-government, there is a serious problem, because now you're challenging the sort of set views about whatever there is. And I find myself to be somebody, quite honestly, who's like smack in the middle. So when I go to Pakistan, people think, oh, here's an American talking to us. And when I'm here, perhaps it's the opposite. What is the view from within government? Because my sense is this is a function of the relationship. You know, if I were working on another country where things were, US-India perhaps, or some other country where the relationship wasn't as rocky, I think you have more space to challenge the set narratives. But is the government cognizant of that? That, there are very set views which I think people who try to challenge them are actually find themselves on the outside rather than being able to make a dent in whatever the sort of stereotypes are, if you will, on both sides for that matter.
Okay, we're going to take two last quick questions and then go back to the panel for final remarks. But the woman in back here.
Hi, I'm Mariam, and I work with IREX. I help implement the Global UGrad Pakistan program, which is funded by the State Department and brings about 200 students, Pakistani college students, to the U.S. every year. So I'd love to speak to Mr. Malik and let you know where these students are and what they're doing. So I just wanted to put a quick plug in, because there's been a lot of talk about bringing non-Pakistani-Americans to Pakistan. I just wanted to give a shout out to LUMS, because it just announced like a fellowship, a Barbara Ali fellowship, where Americans can actually go for a year. And this is basically the goal, is to sort of educate them about Pakistan. And so it's like an experiential learning thing. The second question, I think it's addressed to the entire panel, is that I've only been in the US for 4 years, and I feel like the Pakistani-America diaspora is kind of depoliticized, and I just wanted to see, it's great to see people like Shamila, who's like in the government, and Kulsum, like really active in the social enterprise space, but are there people sort of rallying politically? Are there people entering political parties? Do you see Pakistani-Americans rising up and getting into that side? Because I feel there's a lot of issues that are close to us, and are we like advocating effectively for them, to Congress representatives? So.
Babar Temu with the International Center for Journalists. I've spent countless nights here in DC for the last 2 years thinking if I've committed career suicide, not following the security stream which I followed at grad school in Boston, because I really didn't want to talk about US-Pakistan security issues, and there was nobody else in this city who wanted to talk about anything else, especially in 2011 and starting into this early this year, and even now. So this is a fresh breath of air at this conference, and thank you for organizing this whole thing. I wanted to point out something which Shamila mentioned earlier, that we need more Americans working in Pakistan, And I'm running a program which basically is trying to develop partnerships between Pakistani and American news organizations. And what we do is basically place Pakistani journalists in U.S. newsrooms. And since May last year, we've placed 74 journalists in more than 40 newsrooms in more than 40 cities across the U.S. Not just to go visit, but to work in actual newsrooms, report, publish, and publish back home as well. The problem is we are not being able to send Americans down to Pakistan. I personally talked to the heads of newsrooms, the owners of newsrooms, and what are the barriers of doing this? And they said none. I will actually house American journalists in the annexee in our own villas, basically, because they're rich owners of medias, and we will ensure security, ensure that they actually do a work there. They'll train Pakistani journalists, go out and join reporting projects, and deal with the gripe of most Pakistanis that Pakistan's nuances are not captured in American media here. So from the Pakistani side, that seems to be okay. I feel that the U.S. government is still in their set views of it's very insecure sending American journalists down there. So while this program is funded by State Department, they would actually look very happily towards Pakistanis coming here and working. And they would send Americans. Americans do go, but they just go on a tour, a whirlwind tour of the three cities, maybe Taxila for the historical history of the land. But the real narrative changes and nuances of society come in when they actually work in newsrooms, like you referred to. And most Pakistanis most Americans I've dealt with here are very willing to go down there and work on an individual basis who I've spoken with and dealt with. Just a comment, yeah.
Okay, sorry, I have two very brief comments right here, and then back to the panelists. But keep them brief, please, because I've already got.
I'm not a thinker. I am just a doer. Let me straight offer 8 to 10 internships for Akhuvat. We will be providing boarding and free boarding and lodgings for American Pakistanis who come in the summer and do internships with our organization.
Yeah, I mean, as far as Dunya is
concerned, beat that,
Naseem? Yeah.
How many internships?
Sorry? What did you say?
Can you beat that offer?
Okay, yeah. I said Dunya is happy to do the same as well. You can send internships out. But I wanted to make a more fundamental point. The fact that Pakistan has the largest Fulbright program in the world, ask yourselves what has it done in terms of having an impact. And I would say very little. And why? Because I think it's the demonization of Pakistan here which needs to be taken care of. You can have 20,000 Pakistanis come here and go back. I'm afraid it's not going to make too much of a difference. So just to change the narrative and to change the dynamics, you really need to basically have the movement take place from here to there, and internships, etc. really help.
Okay, well, go back to maybe let's start with you, Shamila, and then end with you.
Okay, Moeed asked me a really difficult question. I'll try to answer it. I'll try. I think that there's an appreciation in the U.S. government for people like you and maybe me who can serve as translators and communicators between these two governments that don't really have good communication skills with each other right now. They've been talking to each other for a long time, but some issues have overwhelmed that communication. And so when that happens, there's a tendency to rely on the outside voices and the outside actors to strengthen the relationship, which is what has happened with this bilateral relationship, but it needed to happen anyway. That's a good thing. I remember when at the beginning of the Obama administration, there was a huge push to talk to civil society in Pakistan, to encourage diaspora to be part of just State Department life in general. And it didn't always feel like foreign policy relevant or foreign policy work, but it was. It was all part of that effort to build and strengthen other voices because the government communications had been challenged by security issues and would continue to be challenged. So there is an appreciation there. But as you mentioned, there is this tendency for people like us to get stovepiped as you are the messenger or you are the translator, and then you're no longer seen as a person of substance. And that's a very dangerous position to be in. And that's why I talk about it, because at the end of the day, this is about your professional career path, and you want to establish yourself as somebody that knows something about issues, not just somebody that brings a background to the table. That's a very dangerous position to be in, because then you have a limit in terms of what opportunities you can pursue. There's also political pressure coming from, I think in Pakistan there was this sense that there are not enough Pakistani Americans in politics, and that's why Pakistan continues to be demonized. That's why the debate is so anti-Pakistan. We need to have kind of more representation in some ways. Again, I think that's a logical, fair conclusion in some ways, but it's not fair to people like me who are trying to do the work for the sake of the work, right? And I've had this interesting experience. I've been in the government for 12 years and I did not have a public voice, because that's not what you do. You're a behind-the-scenes person, and then suddenly you're thrust into the outside space and have to have views. And I think in my case, a lot of people in Pakistan who had been following my career just expected me to be pro-Pakistan because I was Pakistani American, and it's completely false. I mean, my views are based on my analysis of the issues and my experience working on U.S. national security issues, which are, a lot of them are very controversial and negative, and I have to take ownership of those. And so people like you and I, Moeed, I think at the end of the day, we sort of, there's no exit for people like us. I mean, if you're committed to the issues, you're committed to the issues, and you have to assume ownership of the identity, whether you like it or not. And I think that's something that we're going to just, it's an experience that's going to evolve, because right now the relationship is really challenged. But it could be good one day, and I hope it gets better. It's improving, and then that communication will be very different. People like us will be seen differently. But it happens to other communities. I've been asking people, and it happens to other communities from South Asia and other parts of the world as well. So I think some of it is just to be expected. So I hope I answered your question.
Okay. To the gentleman that talked about universities, I think that there's a huge need. I completely agree with you. I think right now we're seeing a lot of work on entrepreneurship incubators happening at LUMS, NUST, and IBA. I mean, that's like the three main universities, but the kids that you see there, aren't necessarily in the most remote, hard-to-reach places or coming from those places. So I do think that the Center for Entrepreneurial Development at IBA, the effort that they've made to bring in this consortium of 8 schools around Pakistan, at least. So these are universities like NED, NED stands for, it's in Punjab, but then we have Fatima Jinnah University is part of it. You have IBA and Sukkar as part of it. So you have like a host of universities that aren't necessarily based in the main cities, they're a little bit more remote, but are still getting the same access to the mentors and the skill training that. This is not my program. That would have been a horrible soundbite. I would have been in so much trouble. No, this is the Institute of Business Administration, IBA in Karachi. The Center for Entrepreneurial Development there, which is an incubator that's been launched, is doing it with a consortium of 8 schools. It's one of our partner organizations that we're working with right now. But I think there's a much bigger need for all of these universities to build capacity within their own schools as well. And I've seen that effort start to happen, but I feel like most of the resources have been focused on the big universities right now. And I would love to engage more of those universities as well. And even within our own portfolio, our entrepreneurs aren't just from the main cities, from necessarily like really upper class backgrounds. One of our entrepreneurs is from southern Punjab. One of them's from Peshawar, working in the northern areas. Like we have, and I've been really interested in how do we actually engage the youth that are at the middle class in Pakistan that don't have the opportunity like I did to go abroad for university. I grew up in Pakistan and came here for college and grad school. And so that's a really big part of this. To your question about whether we're engaging in the region as well as with U.S. startups. So really quick point on that. When we first started Eye to Eye, it was a very one-to-one model. We work really closely with our entrepreneurs, like very focused business support, anything from financial modeling to how are they building their marketing strategy. It's not a very scalable model. I just mean, so for us, if we want to create a more professionalized curriculum around it, like we noticed that all these startups had a lot of the same problems, like building their legal structure out, like how are they operating with investors, how are they getting investment ready and building their marketing strategy. So that's kind of why we moved towards the accelerator model, because of that, but also because entrepreneurs can really learn from each other in Pakistan. And I think there's a need even within the country for entrepreneurs to really learn from each other and to build a community of entrepreneurs rather than a competitive atmosphere where they're all competing for the same amount of money or they're not getting to know each other. In terms of the region, so my plans for the future, I've been really interested in India and like a lot of the entrepreneurship development that's been happening there. I think in Mumbai and Ahmedabad and Hyderabad, we're seeing a lot of Bangalore. We're seeing a lot of these ecosystems develop in India, which is so fascinating. And because the environment is somewhat similar to Pakistan, there's a lot of opportunity for franchising, for cross-border learnings that can happen. And so I would love to engage, and I've been trying to start to build a lot of those relationships right now, to think about it not from a peace process point of view, but just even thinking about how do you build like actual synergies. Like, yeah, like a really great example is Husk Power Systems, HPS in India, that's working in the rice belts in Bihar, and they're actually it's a biomass enterprise, so using rice husks that have been used to create energy. And we've been talking to them about how do we actually franchise this in Pakistan. There's a huge opportunity in Pakistan for it. It's just a matter of like now the visa regulations are starting to decrease, hopefully, so maybe that'll create more cross-border stuff. With U.S. startups, I think that there's a huge amount of opportunity there as well that we want to continue to engage. And I know that the MIT Enterprise Forum does that in terms of actually bringing the winners to the U.S. and showcasing them and things like that. So in any case, like long story short, I just think there's a huge opportunity. It's something that we definitely want to do.
I'm just going to address a question that was asked about the political participation by the Pakistani-American community. I think the Pakistani-American community, they are quite politically active, but they are active more on an individual basis. A lot of them know many congressmen and senators at national level and even at local level. What they lack is organizational backing for those type of things. They go and meet a congressman, have a photo op, and go home, and that's the end of the story. So there's nobody following up to see what the congressman promised or what was discussed in there. So that's one aspect. The other aspect of your question was, are they running for office? And the answer to that is yes, they are, but not in the number that you would like to see them running. They are running for office both at local and national level. But what I would suggest to them is that they have to run as mainstream candidates. They can't run solely as a Pakistani-American and count on the Pakistani-American vote, because we don't have that kind of strength here or that kind of density that we can elect anyone solely on a Pakistani-American. So they have to run on mainstream, and they have to earn their place. Just because they are Pakistani-American does not mean that I should support them. They have to earn their place. So it is happening. It's taking time. And I think what is important for the community, for people like me, is to facilitate that, to make it happen more than what it's happening now, is to help, especially the youth. I mean, don't have somebody like me run for office because I don't even know the rules of football. So we need to have young people here who were born here, who grew up here, who understand the culture, who understand the sports, who understand everything here, have them run for office, and our job should be to support them.
Okay, thank you all very much. Apologies for those of you who didn't have time to ask your question. Corner them afterwards. We are running behind schedule because of a poorly moderated session. Please go get your coffee, come back, and we'll probably start in 5 minutes. But please join me in thanking Irfan, Kulsum, and Shamaila. Thank